Until now, we've never had to think. For the past 10,000 years, the human race has been building our society, and we've been building our cities, our towns, our roads, our cars. We've been building our governments, we've been building our lives, and we've been building our homes, and all that while, for the past 10,000 years, we've never had to think about sustainability until now. And that's a pretty fundamental realization. And when you think about it from that perspective, and when I did, it dawned upon me, if we've never had to think about sustainability, and we've been building all this stuff for all that time, we've kind of built everything wrong up until this point, haven't we? We've been kind of doing it all wrong. Businesses have been conducting business wrong. We've been living our lives kind of wrong. And that means we have a really big task in front of us and a really big question in front of us. And the question that I ask myself is, well, how are we going to live for the next 10,000 years? And that really, really got me to thinking. Because if we're going to live for the next 10,000 years, then everything has got to change. Everything has got to change. Everything about the way the governments govern, everything about the way that people live their lives, and everything about the way that businesses conduct business has got to change. And that deeply, deeply affected me when I realized that. And what dawned on me was, as I was talking to my friends about this, the first thing that they would say to me is, well, I think environmentalism or the sustainability movement's a fad. And I said, no, I think the first big realization that I have is that sustainability is not a fad. Sustainability is going to be our life's work. The people in this room, I think it's going to be our greatest achievement. I think that this century will be about sustainability. I think that when we look back 100 years from now and we're trying to describe this century, I think the thing that we're going to say to ourselves is that this is the moment in human and mankind where we took a turning point and we took a new direction. And that direction is that this was the time that we passed the baton. And what I mean by that is that in last century, in the 20th century, environmentalists and activists held the baton for environmentalism and sustainability. But I don't believe that nonprofits alone can carry the weight of the work that needs to get done. I don't believe that governments alone can carry the weight of the work that needs to get done. So I think when we look back 100 years from now and we describe this period in time, right now, this decade will be the time when businesses took over the baton. Businesses became the leaders in the sustainability movement. And the reason that they become the leaders is because this will be the time when sustainability turns into an industry. This is the time when businesses turn it into an industry of change. And so when I talked to my friends about this, they said, my God, that sounds like a lot of work. I think we need an Apollo project to get all this work done. And what's worse is some of the things that we're trying to get done have a deadline attached to them. And it goes well beyond environmentalist goals. We have educational goals we need to achieve, poverty goals we need to achieve, potable water goals we need to achieve. It's huge. And my friends that would tell me, well, we need an Apollo project, I totally disagree with them. I spent 2 years looking at the data myself just to really, really get it myself. And I came to the conclusion that we need 500 Apollo projects. It's huge, the amount of work that we need to do. And so as an entrepreneur, I sat down and I said, well, what's the most important and fundamental question that we need to ask ourselves with this in mind? And it isn't, how do we create an Apollo project? That's the wrong question. The right question is, how do we build an Apollo project factory? That's where we really are in society. That's what we need to accomplish this century. And the thing about that Apollo project factory is it needs to use the powers and principles of capitalism in order to create those Apollo projects. And the moment I realized this, I will always remember it. I will always remember it. It was about 2 years ago or a little bit longer, September 2007, however long ago that was. And I realized this, and I realized that I believed it, and I realized that it was going to become part of me, and I realized that I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I was in my 5th company that I had been developing, and I realized that I was going to do something that sounded really, really crazy. I brought my founders together of that company. I brought the board of that company together, and I said, I'm leaving. We're going to have to sell this company, and I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to trying to create a Manhattan, or I say not Manhattan Project, but Apollo Project factory. That would have been bad. An Apollo Project factory, and this was really a fundamental point in my life when I said, I am going to leave what I'm doing and not try to do work and then get home from work and try to do good. I'm going to make my work about doing good. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Vergence, I left that company, we sold it for $100 million to Microsoft, and I created Vergence. Vergence is an Apollo Project factory, and that's what I'm going to be doing with the rest of my life, is creating Apollo projects. I thought to myself, I want to use everything that I've learned over my history of being an entrepreneur, being able to create over $3 billion of value in the companies that I've created. I want to take all of that and bring it to bear to try to create Apollo projects and to try to enable other people to create Apollo projects. And a lot of people said to me when I decided to go do this, well, Steve, how are you going to create Apollo projects with a little startup company? The Apollo project was something that was created by our government. They had hundreds of millions of dollars poured into that to get that done. How is a little startup company going to do it? And what I had was a fundamental realization that in this specific period of time, and it occurs at no other time, I think, in human history, 2 things interact in a way that I never saw before, and that's capitalism and activism. Those 2 things normally don't operate and play well with each other. In fact, in the 20th century, this is oftentimes what an activist saw when they saw a top brand. They couldn't even see the brand. They couldn't believe a brand could ever align with their views. They always saw the brand, the top brand, the best brand in the world, perhaps, as the enemy. And brands, conversely, looked at activists and saw this. And they said, I can't imagine ever being a partner with an activist. I can't imagine them ever being part of my business plan. But I sat down and I said, you know what? I think that in this very special time in the human race, we're going to see those things align for the very first time ever. And that got me to thinking that what happens when those 2 things intersect? And it's what brought me to the realization that when those 2 things do intersect, and you can find those 2 things intersecting, some magic happens. And it's the magic that enables a young little startup to create Apollo projects. What happens is they amplify each other. And you can create companies that are 10 times more profitable than a company that only had capitalism alone at its side. You can create companies that can create 10 times more of the change than they could if they only had donors at their side. What's more, it's the thing that enables sustainability to go from being a donor-based thing with limited scale to being a business with limitless scale. It's also the thing that I think could be the trigger point that enables businesses to create an industry out of changing our society to becoming a more sustainable place. It is the fundamental thing that could perhaps enable us as a society to let business take the baton and carry a lot of the weight of the sustainability movement. Thanks.